The night the truth decided to wear rags instead of gold, no one in Kijani Village knew their lives were about to change forever. The fire was still burning low, the drums had gone quiet, and the moon hung like a watchful eye in the sky when an old man whispered a plan that would break pride, expose hearts, and shock even those who thought they knew love. If you listen closely, you will hear this story is not just about a beggar, but about the danger of judging a soul by its clothes. Kijani Village lay between wide green fields and tall baobab trees whose roots gripped the red earth like ancient fingers. It was a place of tradition, where elders spoke in proverbs and children learned respect before they learned to run. At the edge of the village lived an old man named Mzee Kambale. His hair was white like ash after a long fire, his back bent with years, but his eyes were sharp and deep, like they had seen many seasons and many lies. Long ago, Mzee Kambale was one of the richest men in the region. He owned cattle, land, and grain stores that fed many mouths. But after his wife died and age slowed his steps, he stepped away from public life. The village believed his wealth was gone, spent on sickness and sorrow. Only a few elders knew the truth. Mzee Kambale had one son, Jabari. Jabari was tall, strong, and kind, with a smile that made people trust him easily. He had traveled beyond the village to learn reading, numbers, and ways of the modern world, yet he still greeted elders with bowed head and respectful words. Many mothers prayed that Jabari would look toward their daughters. But Jabari's heart already belonged to one woman. Her name was Naledi. Naledi was known for her beauty. Her skin shone like polished bronze in the sun, and her laughter carried far across the market. She dressed well, spoke boldly, and came from a comfortable middle-class family. People said she walked like someone who knew her worth. Jabari loved her deeply and planned to make her his wife. To him, Naledi was smart, confident, and strong. But to Mzee Kambale, love without wisdom was like building a house without checking the ground. One evening, as the village settled into sleep, Mzee Kambale called Jabari to sit beside him near the small cooking fire. The old man stirred the embers slowly, his face glowing red and gold in the light. He spoke softly, asking about Naledi, about her ways, her words, and how she treated others. Jabari answered with love-filled eyes, praising her beauty and spirit. Mzee Kambale listened, nodding, but his heart felt heavy. He had lived long enough to know that a person's true heart often showed itself only when no reward was promised. After Jabari left for the night, Mzee Kambale stayed awake. The wind moved through the trees like whispers of the ancestors. He remembered an old saying his father once told him, that the river that forgets its source will one day run dry. Slowly, a plan formed in his mind, dangerous but necessary. He would test the hearts of the women in the village, especially the one his son loved, not with words, but with silence and hunger. At dawn, when roosters cried and women began sweeping their yards, Mzee Kambale opened a hidden chest. Inside were old, torn clothes, dusty sandals, and a wooden staff darkened by age. These were not signs of his wealth, but of humility. With careful hands, he dressed himself like a beggar. He rubbed ash on his skin, bent his back further, and practiced a weak walk. When he looked at his reflection in a bowl of water, even he almost believed the lie. As he stepped onto the village path, no one recognized him. Children ran past him laughing. Women carried water pots without looking twice. The old man smiled sadly. He knew this journey would hurt, but truth often does before it heals. His heart beat fast, not from fear, but from hope that somewhere in this village, kindness still lived. Naledi, at that same hour, prepared for the day. She admired herself in polished metal, fixing her hair and jewelry. She spoke with friends about Jabari and the life she expected, a life of comfort and respect. Outside her compound, the world moved as usual, unaware that a test older than gold had begun walking among them. Mzee Kambale paused at the edge of the market, leaning on his staff. He watched people closely, listening more than speaking. He would not beg loudly. He would simply ask for water, for leftover food, for a moment of kindness. In this silence, hearts would speak louder than words. He knew some would fail, some would pass, and some would surprise him. As the sun climbed higher, the old man took his first step deeper into the village, carrying not a bag of coins, but a heavy question. Who among these women saw people, and who saw only status? Who understood that today's beggar could be tomorrow's elder? And what would happen when the woman his son loved faced this test? If you are still listening, stay with this story until the very end, because what happens next will remind us all why our elders say character is the only wealth that never fades. And if these stories of the land speak to your heart, remember to walk with us again, listen again, and share this fire with others, because the wisdom of Africa lives only when it is heard. Morning grew hot in Kijani Village, and the sun climbed like a curious child wanting to see everything. Mzee Kambale walked slowly, leaning on his wooden staff, letting his shadow stretch long on the red soil. He did not rush. He had learned that truth comes out when people forget they are being watched. The market filled with voices, goats bleated, and women bargained loudly over tomatoes and dried fish. The beggar moved among them like a quiet question no one wanted to answer. He stopped near the well where women lined up with clay pots balanced on their heads. The sound of water splashing echoed like laughter. Mzee Kambale cleared his throat and spoke in a low, tired voice, asking for a small cup of water. Some women turned their backs as if they had not heard. One pulled her pot closer and frowned, whispering that beggars brought sickness. Another laughed and said he should work instead of troubling honest people. A young girl stared at him with wide eyes but was pulled away by her mother. The old man nodded gently and stepped aside, his heart steady, his memory sharp. From the well, he moved to the row of bigger homes near the mango trees, where painted gates and iron locks showed wealth. At one house, a woman in fine cloth opened the gate just enough to look out. When she saw his torn clothes, she wrinkled her nose and told him to leave before her dogs were released. At another, a man threw a piece of spoiled cassava at his feet and told him to be grateful. The cassava broke apart in the dust. Mzee Kambale whispered a soft thank you and walked on. He did not touch the food. He was not testing hunger alone, he was testing hearts. Children followed him for a while, mocking his walk, copying his bent back, singing silly songs. Some threw small stones that bounced harmlessly on the ground. He kept walking. He remembered his own childhood, the days when elders taught children that every gray hair carried a story. He wondered where those lessons had gone. The village felt busy, proud, and loud, yet something gentle had been lost along the way. As the day moved on, talk about the beggar spread like smoke. People spoke of him in sharp words, guessing where he came from and why he was there. In the shade near Naledi's home, her friends gathered, fanning themselves and laughing. Naledi listened as they spoke. One woman said the beggar was lazy. Another said such people brought bad luck to homes they entered. Naledi nodded and added that strong villages were built by people who worked, not by those who begged. Her voice was clear and confident, and her friends agreed, pleased by her certainty. Jabari passed by and heard his name spoken with excitement, then heard the talk about the beggar. He felt a small tightness in his chest. He did not argue, but his eyes followed the path where the old man had gone. Something about the story troubled him, like a drum beat out of rhythm. He thought of his father at home, quiet and thoughtful, and wondered why his heart felt uneasy. Mzee Kambale reached the edge of the market where poor traders sat with small baskets of groundnuts and roasted corn. A thin woman with tired eyes looked up at him. Without a word, she poured a little water into a cracked cup and handed it to him. She did not smile, but her eyes were kind. He drank slowly, thanked her, and moved on. He marked her face in his mind, the way one remembers the shape of a tree on a long road. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the beggar rested beneath a baobab tree. He listened to the village breathe. He had seen enough to know that wealth had made some hearts hard and fear had made others cruel. Yet he also knew the test was not complete. The one who mattered most had not yet faced him. Naledi's words still rang in his ears, spoken without seeing his eyes. When the sun began to sink, drums called people home. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the smell of stew filled the air. Mzee Kambale stood and straightened his back as much as his disguise allowed. He set his staff firmly on the ground and chose the path toward Naledi's compound. Each step felt heavier than the last. This meeting would decide more than a marriage. It would decide what kind of future his son would carry. At Naledi's home, laughter spilled into the yard. Friends sat together, sharing stories and plans, dreaming of better days. The beggar paused at the gate, took a breath, and prepared to ask for water. He knew eyes would turn, words would fall, and hearts would show themselves. He did not pray for kindness, he prayed for truth. As he lifted his hand to knock, the sky burned orange and purple, as if even the ancestors leaned closer to watch. What would Naledi do when faced with rags instead of praise? What would Jabari see when love met judgment? Stay with this story, because the next moment will change everything, and the answer will not be gentle. The gate creaked as Mzee Kambale tapped it gently with his staff. The yard fell quiet, and several faces turned toward him. Naledi sat at the center on a low stool, her dress bright, her chin lifted. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Naledi's eyes moved from the old man's dusty sandals to his torn shirt, and her mouth tightened as if she had tasted something bitter. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp and clear. The beggar bowed his head slightly. He spoke softly, asking only for a cup of water, maybe a small piece of food if there was any left. His voice carried the tired sound of long roads and empty nights. Some of Naledi's friends laughed. One covered her mouth as if the request itself was a joke. Naledi stood up. "We are not a charity house," she said. "There is a well in the village. Go there. Do not bring your dirt and your bad luck here." Her words fell heavy, one after another, like stones dropped into a pot. The beggar nodded, still calm. "Daughter," he said gently, "even a bird needs a place to rest." Naledi's eyes flashed. "Do not call me daughter," she snapped. "If you can speak like that, you can work. Leave now." She waved her hand as if brushing away flies. Someone behind her clapped and laughed. Mzee Kambale felt the words strike his chest, not because they hurt him, but because they showed him something clear and cold. He turned slowly, preparing to leave without another sound. As he did, Jabari's voice called out from the gate. "What is happening?" Jabari asked. He had just arrived, carrying a small bundle from the market. His eyes moved from the beggar to Naledi's hard face, then to the laughing friends. He felt heat rise in his cheeks. Naledi spoke quickly, telling Jabari the beggar had come begging at her home. "I told him to go," she said proudly. "We cannot encourage laziness." Jabari looked at the old man. Something about the bend of his shoulders felt familiar, but the disguise held. "Father," the word almost escaped his mouth, but he caught himself. "Elder," he said instead, unsure why his voice shook, "are you all right?" Before the beggar could answer, Naledi stepped between them. "Do not get close," she warned. "You do not know where he has been." That was when a small voice spoke from the side. "Please," it said softly, "take this." A young woman named Amara stepped forward. She was plain, wearing a faded dress, her feet bare. She held out a small calabash of water and a piece of flat bread wrapped in cloth. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from shyness. Naledi turned on her. "Amara, are you mad?" she said. "You barely have enough for yourself." Amara lowered her eyes. "My mother taught me that when someone is thirsty, you do not ask questions," she replied. Her voice was quiet, but steady. The beggar accepted the water with both hands. He drank slowly, as if each sip mattered. When he finished, he looked at Amara with eyes that seemed to see beyond her clothes, beyond her poverty. "May your path be cool," he said, a blessing wrapped in simple words. Naledi laughed loudly. "See how easily he is pleased," she said to her friends. "That is how beggars trap kind fools." Jabari felt something break inside him. He said nothing, but his shoulders dropped. He watched Amara step back into the shadows, embarrassed by the attention, and watched the beggar turn away again. As Mzee Kambale walked out of the yard, the sky darkened. Clouds rolled in, heavy and slow. The first drops of rain touched the dust, releasing a deep, earthy smell. The beggar stopped just beyond the gate and leaned on his staff. He spoke without turning around. "The rain does not choose where it falls," he said. "But the ground decides what it keeps." Naledi rolled her eyes. "Old men and their words," she muttered. Thunder sounded far away. The beggar continued down the path, rain soaking his clothes, washing ash from his skin. Jabari stood frozen, watching him disappear. Naledi took Jabari's arm and pulled him back toward the firelight, speaking of tomorrow and plans and laughter, but Jabari heard none of it. His heart beat loud, like a warning drum. That night, rain fell hard on Kijani Village. Mzee Kambale sat alone under a small shelter near the fields. He did not sleep. He replayed every word, every laugh, every turn back. The picture was complete now. He knew who saw people and who saw only themselves. In Naledi's house, sleep did not come easily either. Though she would not admit it, the beggar's calm eyes had followed her into the dark. Amara lay awake as well, worried she had done wrong by speaking. Jabari stared at the ceiling, feeling love and shame wrestle inside him. When morning came, the beggar was gone. People searched the paths and whispered stories. Some said he moved on. Some said the rain washed him away. Only Mzee Kambale knew the truth, and he smiled sadly as he returned home to prepare the final act. If this moment stirred something in you, stay close to this fire. Do not leave yet. What is about to be revealed will shake Kijani Village and teach a lesson our elders have guarded for generations. Listen to the end, and remember to walk with this channel again, because the next chapter brings the truth out into the open, and it will not be hidden for long. 3 days passed after the rain, and Kijani Village felt uneasy, like a drum pulled too tight. People spoke in low voices about the beggar who had vanished. Some said he was a trickster sent by the spirits. Others said he was just another poor soul who moved on. Naledi laughed when the topic came up, brushing it aside as nonsense, but her laughter came too quickly, like someone closing a door to hide a mess inside. On the 4th morning, a messenger's drum echoed across the village. The sound rolled over roofs and fields, calling everyone to listen. Soon after, a young boy ran through the paths shouting an announcement that made people stop in their tracks. Mzee Kambale had called for a great gathering that evening. He wished to speak about his son's future and the woman who would stand beside him. The news spread fast, carried by mouths faster than feet. Excitement filled the air. Women hurried to wash clothes and braid hair. Men spoke proudly about family ties and future wealth. Naledi's friends gathered around her, already calling her wife of Jabari. Naledi herself felt sure. She had beauty, confidence, and a respected name. What else could an old man want? She pushed away the small voice inside her that remembered the beggar's calm eyes. Amara heard the news while helping her mother grind grain. Her hands slowed. She felt a knot in her stomach. She knew she did not belong among such dreams. She was poor, quiet, and often unseen. Still, she remembered the blessing the beggar had spoken and felt both warmth and fear. She said nothing and returned to her work. Jabari was restless all day. He wanted to speak to his father but found the old man silent and distant. Mzee Kambale sat in the shade, carving small lines into a piece of wood, his face unreadable. Jabari wondered why his father had not mentioned the beggar. The silence felt heavy, like a question waiting to be answered. As the sun began to sink, people gathered at the open ground near the big baobab tree. Mats were spread, and elders sat in a circle. The air smelled of dust and smoke, and the sky burned with deep orange light. Drums beat slowly, steady like a heartbeat. Mzee Kambale arrived last, walking with calm strength. He wore clean clothes now, simple but dignified. Many bowed their heads, reminded of the respect he commanded. Naledi sat near the front, chin high, her dress bright against the earth. Jabari sat beside her, though his heart felt far away. Amara stood at the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind taller women, wishing she could disappear. Mzee Kambale raised his hand, and silence fell. He spoke of tradition, of how marriages were once chosen not by beauty or wealth, but by character. He told short stories, asking simple questions. He asked women how they would treat a stranger, how they would speak to someone with nothing to offer. People answered carefully now, sensing a test in his words. Then, from behind the crowd, a familiar figure stepped forward. Gas rippled through the gathering. It was the beggar. He looked the same as before, staff in hand, clothes still worn, but his presence felt different. Naledi stiffened. Jabari's breath caught. Whispers flew like startled birds. Why was this man here? Who had invited him? The beggar walked slowly to the center and stood beside Mzee Kambale. For a long moment, neither spoke. The beggar lifted his head and looked around the crowd. His eyes were clear, steady, and full of knowing. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others felt their throats go dry. Mzee Kambale asked him to speak. The beggar did not accuse. He did not shout. He told stories instead. He spoke of a village where kindness had faded and pride had grown loud. He spoke of doors closed to thirsty mouths, of laughter thrown like stones, of one small hand offering water without fear. Naledi's heart began to pound. She felt eyes turning toward her, though no name had been spoken. Jabari's face grew pale as understanding slowly rose like a painful sun. The beggar paused and leaned on his staff. A village, he said softly, is not known by its gates, but by how it treats the weak. Mzee Kambale nodded. Then, with slow, careful movements, the beggar straightened his back. He removed the staff and stood tall. He wiped his face, and in that moment, the disguise fell away like old leaves. Gasps turned into cries. Murmurs grew into shocked silence. It was Mzee Kambale. The crowd froze. Naledi's legs felt weak. Jabari stood up, his mouth open, his eyes filling with tears. The truth settled over the village like heavy rain. Mzee Kambale looked around, his voice now strong and clear. He spoke of what he had seen, of words spoken without kindness, of hearts weighed and measured. He spoke Naledi's actions without anger, but without softness. Each word felt like a mirror held up to her face. Naledi fell to her knees, tears streaking her cheeks. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Her pride had nowhere to hide. Jabari felt his chest ache as love and truth collided inside him. Then Mzee Kambale spoke of Amara. He called her forward. She stepped trembling into the light. He told the village of her quiet kindness, her respect, her simple courage. Murmurs of surprise rose. Some faces showed shame. The old man lifted his hands. "Tonight," he said, "we have all been tested." Silence followed, deep and heavy. The drums did not beat. The wind did not move. Every heart waited. If you feel this moment pressing on your chest, do not turn away. Stay until the end of this story, because what comes next will decide love, loss, and the lesson this village will never forget. The silence after the revelation was thick, like smoke that refused to rise. Mzee Kambale stood at the center, no longer a beggar, but not a king either. He was simply an elder who had seen too much to speak carelessly. The crowd looked from him to Naledi, then to Amara, then to Jabari, as if the ground itself had shifted beneath their feet. Naledi was the first to break. She crawled forward on her knees, her fine dress dragging in the dust she once feared. Tears fell freely now, washing away the confidence that had wrapped her like jewelry. She begged for forgiveness, saying she had not known, saying fear and pride had blinded her eyes. Her words came fast, tripping over one another, but they could not climb back to the place she had fallen from. Mzee Kambale listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke slowly. He said forgiveness was a river that flowed only when the ground was ready. He reminded her that kindness given only when reward is certain is not kindness at all. The crowd murmured, many lowering their heads, seeing themselves in her shame. Jabari stepped forward, his voice shaking. He spoke of love, of how he believed in Naledi, of how the test had cut him deeply. He did not shout. He did not accuse. His pain was quieter, heavier. Mzee Kambale placed a hand on his son's shoulder, grounding him like a root holding a young tree. Then the elder turned to Amara. She stood stiff, unsure where to place her eyes. He asked her why she helped the beggar when she had so little. Amara swallowed and answered simply that her mother taught her that tomorrow is never promised, but kindness can travel ahead of us. Her words were plain, but they landed with force. Mzee Kambale nodded, and the village felt something shift. He spoke of wealth that rots when locked away and of hearts that grow rich by sharing. He announced that his son would not marry a woman chosen by beauty or class, but by character tested in silence. Gasps followed. Naledi cried out, but her voice broke into nothing. The decision was clear, but it was not cruel. Mzee Kambale did not shame Naledi further. He said her lesson was heavy, but life had given it to her early, and that was still a gift. He told her to go and rebuild her heart if she wished to stand tall again. Amara was invited to sit beside Jabari. She hesitated, looking around, afraid of stares. Jabari met her eyes, not with desire, but with respect. The crowd watched in stunned quiet as the poor, unseen girl sat where the proud had once claimed victory. Some villagers felt anger. Others felt relief. Many felt exposed. The gathering ended without drums or songs. People walked home in silence, carrying thoughts heavier than baskets of grain. That night, Naledi left her house and sat alone near the fields. She remembered the beggar's eyes, calm and patient, and felt a deep ache she could not name. Jabari stayed awake, thinking of love reshaped by truth. Amara cried quietly, afraid of the future even as hope touched her door. Above them, the stars burned bright. The ancestors had spoken, and the village would never be the same. Do not leave yet. The final chapter brings healing, wisdom, and the lesson that will stay with you long after the fire dies. Stay with this channel, listen to the end, and carry this story with you, because what comes next is the heart of it all. The morning after the great gathering came softly, as if the village itself was learning how to breathe again. The sun rose slowly over Kijani Village, touching the roofs, the trees, and the red earth with gentle light. People stepped out of their homes quieter than usual. Voices were low. Eyes looked inward. The test of the beggar had ended, but its lesson had just begun. Jabari went to his father early. He found Mzee Kambale sitting outside, feeding grain to chickens, as calm as any other day. Jabari sat beside him without speaking for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but full of feeling. He told his father that his heart had changed, not by force, but by understanding. He said he was ready to choose a life built on respect, not pride. Mzee Kambale smiled, a small smile filled with relief, and placed his hand on his son's head in blessing. Amara did not sleep much that night. She feared whispers, stares, and the weight of sudden attention. When she walked through the village that morning, some people greeted her kindly for the first time. Others avoided her eyes. She kept her head low, remembering her mother's words that humility is a shield stronger than gold. When Jabari met her at the well and thanked her for her kindness, she simply nodded, unsure how to carry a future she never imagined. Naledi stayed inside her home for many days. Her friends stopped visiting. The laughter that once filled her yard was gone. She thought of every word she had spoken to the beggar and felt their sharp edges cut her memory. One evening, she left her house and went to the river. There, alone, she cried not because she lost Jabari, but because she finally saw herself clearly. In that moment, something inside her softened. She understood that pride had dressed her better than any cloth, but it had left her cold. Weeks passed. Slowly, the village healed. Mzee Kambale called the elders again, not for judgment, but for teaching. He reminded them that traditions are not decorations, but roots. He told the story of the beggar openly, allowing shame to turn into wisdom. Parents began correcting their children gently. People shared food more freely. The poor were greeted with names instead of silence. In time, Jabari and Amara were married in a simple ceremony beneath the baobab tree. There was no display of wealth, but there was music, laughter, and peace. Amara wore a modest dress. Jabari stood tall beside her, proud not of what she owned, but of who she was. Mzee Kambale watched them with eyes full of tears, knowing his dangerous plan had protected his son and restored his village. Naledi attended the ceremony from a distance. She did not join the crowd, but she did not turn away either. When the drums played, she felt no anger, only understanding. Later, she approached Amara and offered a quiet apology. Amara accepted it without pride. Two women stood there, changed by the same truth in different ways. As the sun set that day, Mzee Kambale spoke one last time to the village. He said a beggar's bowl may be empty, but his eyes are full. He said the heart that judges by appearance will always be poor, no matter how much it owns. And he said the greatest test in life often comes without warning, dressed in dust and silence. Kijani Village returned to its rhythms, but it was not the same village as before. It had learned that character speaks when comfort is absent, and that true wealth is revealed when nothing is offered in return. And so, dear listener, this story ends, but its lesson walks with us still. When a stranger stands before you, remember the beggar. When pride lifts your chin too high, remember Naledi. When fear tells you to turn away, remember Amara. And when love asks you to choose, remember Jabari and the wisdom of his father. If this story touched your heart, stay close to this fire. Walk with this channel again. Like, share, and subscribe so these stories of the land may continue to live, because African wisdom survives only when it is told, heard, and carried forward. Until we meet again, keep your heart humble, your eyes open, and your kindness ready.